What's going on, fellow gamers? My name is JustPlayJ, and I want to welcome you to my channel. In today's segment, I'm going to fulfill a request from a couple of subscribers based on showing a tutorial on how to provide the best optimal settings for your Dolphin MMJR emulator. And this video is primarily for those that have a Retroid Pocket 3 Plus or a RG505, or primarily anybody that has a device that has a Unisoc Tiger T618 chip. But even though I'm using the Ayn Odin Lite here, these settings can be used for those devices. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, on whatever device that you're on, what you want to do is you want to go over to wherever your Dolphin MMJR emulator is, and you want to go ahead and select the emulator or open up the application. And so it'll take you to this screen. What you'll see is your games that you've selected for your application. But what you want to do to get started is you want to go into your settings menu, which will be the cogwheel in the upper right hand corner of your application. So you want to go ahead and select that. So you have all these settings here. So we're going to go over each one, starting with the general settings. So you want to go ahead and select the general settings. And so this can be confusing for a lot of beginners, but I'm not going to go in depth with too much in depth with any of these to explain what these do or what these do not do. So we'll just go over each one and see which one should be selected and which one should not be selected. So for your CPU core, you want to keep the JIT ARM64 recompiler selected, so keep that as is. And then for your dual core, you want to keep that selected. And I have an Ayn Odin Lite, but if you have an lower end device, such as the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus or any T618 device in your possession, you want to have this selected overall. But because I have the Ayn Odin Lite, I don't need this to be selected because this one is a higher powered device and it should run my game smoothly. But you would need this to run at least some of your GameCube games or your Wii games properly. And so it's up to you as a beginner to keep it at the emulated clock speed of 100%. But for those beginners, what I would recommend is putting it at 60%. That increases even though the clock speed should indicate the faster frame rate on your device, but because the T618 is a lower end device, the clock speed would kind of allow for a little bit of frame skipping if you keep it at 60%. It improves the performance of your gameplay when you keep this selected. So that's why I highly recommend 60% as your emulator clock speed. So once you do that, you select OK. For the speed limit, you would keep it at 100%. On your advanced settings, keep sync on skip idle selected. Fast disk speed will remain unchecked. The JIT follow branch you can keep selected. Enable cheats function. If you have any cheat codes or anything like that in your possession, or if you were able to find any GameCube cheat codes and you want to use those, you can enable cheats on that. For change this automatically, you keep that unselected. For my device, again, I have a higher end device, so I don't need to select this. But for those that do have the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus or the RG505M or the Retroid Pocket Flip, you want to select this to improve the audio for your gameplay. And then stretching buffer size, you keep it at you keep it at 80. For your audio backend, you can either choose OpenSLES or QBEB. If I'm saying that right, I'm thinking that's what it is, QBEB. But primarily, you keep at your default settings at OpenSLES. And then emulated and memory size override, you would just keep that unchecked. After those settings are adjusted, then what you would do is select save, and then you go on to the next cogwheel. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. You shouldn't save until after you've gone through your settings. So you would actually have to hit the back button. So once you get in here, you would just hit the back button on your device and go to the next settings. My bad. And so for your video backend, since you have a handheld Android device with the Unisoc T618 chip, you want to keep the video backend at Vulkan. Otherwise, if you keep it at OpenGL, then the games may or may not perform well depending on what game you're playing. But for maybe high-end emulation games, you want to actually keep it on the Vulkan backend. And then this is optional whether or not you want to show the FPS for your games. So you can either keep it checked. So if you want to play your games, you can actually see the frame rate, the actual frame rate as you're playing the games. Or if you don't want to and it's not necessary, you can keep it unchecked. That's totally up to you. For your shader compilation mode, you would keep it on synchronous, and then this is option here for compile shaders before starting. You basically it kind of just loads up the caches prior to the game running. So if you don't want to see like any temporary skips as the game is running, then you would select this to compile the shaders, which means your games would run a little bit faster and reduce a lot of stuttering. So that's totally up to you. It's not required. It's not a requirement for your games. Then you want to keep back-end multi-threading selected. And then aspect ratio for the games will be auto. So that includes both the GameCube and the Wii games that you have in your library. So for GameCube games, primarily for me, I like to keep it at the 4:3 ratio, whereas the GameCube games would always be at a 16:9 ratio. But you can always force a screen hack, which we'll show later on in the settings. So that's pretty much it for the graphic settings. So what you can do is just go ahead and select back, and then this is where you would go into your enhancement settings. So for your enhancements, for internal resolution, it's usually set at the native of 1x. But if you want to kind of boost it up a little bit, I would highly recommend just keep it, or you can either keep it at 1x native, which the graphics look fine at, but if you want to boost it just a little bit more, you can put it at 1.5x, which is what I'd rather do. Um, anybody that has a Retro Pocket 3 Plus or the RG505 devices or PalKitty T618 devices, you can go as high as 1.5%. And I feel like that's the highest you should go. If you go anywhere beyond 1x, unless it's like a lower resolution game, then your games will tend to run a little slower. So, and then for the custom hires textures, you want to leave those unchecked. For more enhancement settings, I usually keep the anti-aliasing off default. Anthroposcopic filtering, you can just keep that at off because it really doesn't affect the game too much. The scaled EFB copy, you can either uncheck it or check it, depending on the game that you want. But for this device, and I do it for my other devices as well too, I usually keep this check marked. The per pixel lighting, you can leave those unchecked, and then the force texture filtering, you can leave that unchecked. Always leave this at force 24-bit color. You want to have the improvement of graphics. And disable fog, not necessary. You can leave that unchecked. Disable copy filter, leave that unchecked as well. And then these remaining two, arbitrary bitmap detection, leave it checked. The approximate logic op, you can leave that checked as well too. And then the widescreen hack is what I was mentioning earlier. Now, if you want your GameCube games to run at 16:9 resolution, then you would actually select this check mark to have to force that 16:9 ratio. But otherwise, if you want to just keep it at the original 4:3 ratio, you just leave this unchecked. But that's totally up to you as the gamer, as a beginner. So if you want to have a widescreen GameCube gameplay, then you can use this widescreen hack. But we're pretty much done with this part of the settings, so you can actually go back. And then what we'll do is go into hacks. That's not really much to do here. So with the embedded frame buffer, you will keep your skip EFB access from CPU checked, your ignore format changes checked, your store EFB copies to texture only selected, the defer EFB copies to RAM selected. You can leave the defer EFB cache invalidation unmarked, unchecked. And then the texture cache, you just keep it at low. GPU texture decoding, leave unchecked. And then the store XFB copies the texture only, you can leave that checked as well. So these are the external frame buffers. Immediately present XFB, you leave that unchecked. Skip duplicate frames, you keep that checked. And then your other section, the fast depth calculation check marked, the TMEM cache emulation, you leave that checked as well too. So there's pretty much not, you don't have to do any adjustments here in the hex settings at all. You just leave everything as is. And then your interface, not much to do here. If you want to expand the cutout area, that's just to expand the resolution or the picture display to the whole completed area or whatever to, I guess, minimize the bezels or something like that. And then pretty much you don't have to do anything here. If there's any updates for MMJR, which there hasn't been for a while, then you can just leave that checked as well. But I don't believe we'll have any updates anytime soon for the MMJR emulator. But pretty much nothing to do here. So you just go back and everything here, nothing to change here in your settings. For GameCube, for Wii settings, Wii remote continuous scanning, nothing here, nothing here. Widescreen, everything's all set. PL60, just no changes here, no adjustments here. And then your debug section, seems like you don't need to check anything here. So with this general settings, you're pretty much done with your general settings, your graphic settings, all that stuff. So what you can do is just go ahead and hit save. So it'll take you back to this screen. But you guys are not ready to play your game just yet. So what you need to do is actually configure your controllers for your GameCube. And so what you need to do is click on these three buttons here in the right corner, right next to the play button here. So you select these three. And then what you'll see over here in the corner is your first selection will be GameCube input. So you go ahead and select that. And then since your device is your first controller, you go into your GameCube controller 1, select that, and then what you need to do is actually tap on emulated. And so what you'll have is your selection of buttons here. So however you want to set it up, you just go ahead and do that. So what you do for your A button, I primarily like to put it at the right part of my button, or the right part. So if you have your if you have a up and down, left and right style button, which is YXBA, then I would input A to B as the A. So that would be my A button. And then my B button would be my B button. So if you have it set up like the Nintendo controller or like your retro style controller, that's actually like your Nintendo style controller. So if you actually look at an image of a GameCube controller or whatever, or just like a Super Nintendo controller, that's pretty much how you want to set up your GameCube controller as. So your X button would be your X button, and then your Y would be your Y. And then Z, I would use the L2 button on your device as the Z button. And then your start button, of course, will be your start button. So you use the start button for that. Your control stick will be your left analog trigger. So what you would do is use your analog and just input the binding for your left analog. So you would select up on your left analog trigger. I'm sorry, your left analog stick. Sorry for the correction. And then you press down on your left analog stick, left on the left analog stick, and then right on the right analog stick. And then your C stick would be your right analog stick. So you'll do up on your right analog stick, down on the right analog stick, left on the right analog stick, and then right on the right analog stick. And then of course your triggers will be your L1 and your R1 buttons. So you select that. And then for your L analog, you just press down on your L analog. So if you have the clickable L3 button, then you click on that. And that will be your button. And then for the R analog, you just click on the R analog stick. And then your D-pad, of course, is your D-pad. The simple up, down, left, and right. And then rumble, you have the option to turn it on and turn it off, but you can't do it here. So you're pretty much done with your GameCube settings. So what you want to do is just go ahead and hit save, because that was very simple. And you should be able to play your GameCube games now with your configured buttons. But if you have any Wii games, like I do, I'm scrolling over to the right now, you actually need to set up your Wii remote and your Wii Nunchuk. So these are the general settings for your Wii controller. So you can practically play a majority of your Wii games with this input that I'm going to provide for you today. But if you're trying to play something like Tomb Raider Anniversary or like um, Wario Land Shake Dimension or um, anything like Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, those provide a more advanced tutorial, which I may provide if necessary. But for right now in this video, we're just going to do the general settings for your Wii games. So what you want to do again is just select those three buttons again in the top right corner. And then what you would do is select Wii input. And so, of course, your device is your controller one. So you select the Wii remote one. And then you click on emulate it. And now you have your extension using your nunchuck. But for right now, we'll get to the nunchuck extension later on. But right now, we want to configure our buttons here. So there's been people that have decided to, that set up their buttons a certain way, but this is my preference. So when you have your A and B buttons, I usually like to put the A and B buttons at the bottom and then the 1 and 2 buttons at the top. But some people like to switch it around. It's like whatever is comfortable for you. So the A B buttons would be like BA on your Switch or your Nintendo controller. Like you still do it Nintendo style. So my A button would be my A button to the right, and then the B button would be the B, like the bottom button would be my B. And then one would be like 1, 2, so it'd be like Y then X on your control pad. So if you have it in the Nintendo style, you want to be like Y or X. So one would be your Y, and then 2 would be your X. Okay, but it doesn't matter how you configure it. But this is the way I like to play my games. Okay, and then your minus button is actually your select button, and then your plus is your start button. So you hit those buttons. And then home would be, now, this is the cool thing. So it depends on how you want to do it. So if you have let's say a Retro Pocket Flip, or if you have, I'm trying to think of any devices that may have like those extra buttons. Um, if you have, like I have an Ayn Odin Lite, so there's extra buttons on the back of my device. Then you can use any of those additional buttons as your home button for your configuration. But for those that don't have it, you can just leave this as is. So for this video, we're just going to leave it as is. Okay. So your IR button is your pointer button. So it's your pointer for your Wii game. So if you're trying to move around, like point at something or whatever, or like your IR, then you would use your right analog stick as your pointer. So this is what we're going to use for configuration. So for your up button, you're going to use the right analog stick. You will select up on the right analog stick, down on the right analog stick, left on the right analog stick, and then right on the right analog stick. Okay. And like I said, for a future video, I can go ahead and do a tutorial for the swing up and down, left to right, all that stuff. But that's for another video. But these are just general settings for a majority of your Wii games. And this is your shake button. This is what's necessary for a lot of games. So for your shake button, you're going to use just the same button. And I typically like to use the R1 button for all of my buttons. So X will be R1, Y will be R1, and Z would be R1. Okay? And then your D-pad, you're going to use your regular D-pad. So up, down, left, and right. And then hotkeys. Okay, so this is a fun one, guys. So basically, the hotkey, basically, if you're trying to flip your Wii remote sideways, this is what this is. So sideways toggle, use a certain button for sideways, and then you don't it's up to you if you decide to use the upright toggle, but you won't need to use the upright toggle hotkey if you have the sideways toggle hotkey because you can always click it on and off. So for my sideways toggle, I have to use the R3 button. So you click on the right analog stick button as your R3 to provide that hotkey. So whenever you have a game that tells you that you need to use a horizontal Wii remote, you use your sideways toggle button as your horizontal remote. And then you can always click it again to turn off to the regular Wii remote style. And I think we're almost done, so don't click save just yet. We need to actually go back to the top because we want to also configure our Nunchuk extension. So what you do is you select the Nunchuk extension, and then you click on Nunchuk, and then you have these additional buttons for your Nunchuk configuration. So for your C, what you use is L1 for C, and then you use L2 for Z. Okay, so that's the partial selection for your Nunchuk. And then for the stick, you would use your left analog stick to configure these. So your left analog stick, up on the left analog stick, down on the left analog stick, left on the left analog stick, and right on the left analog stick. And then again, this is for another time. But right now, I'm just showing you guys general settings for a nice portion of the Wii games that would be played on the device. And then pretty much you're done. So we can go back and we can go ahead and save this. And you're all set. And so just to give you an idea, we're going to just, we'll go ahead and test a few games here.
Taking a tea break. Let's get on with it.
Target's down.
Area clear. I'm moving to the truck.
Moving to your location.
Well, that wraps up my tutorial for the general GameCube and Wii settings for the Ayn Odin Lite and for your T618 device, whatever device you may have. I hope that this video was helpful. If you want me to do any more tutorials based on emulation or other GameCube games or Wii games or whatever, please let me know in the comments below. If you did like this video and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please be sure to do so. Be on the lookout for future videos, and I hope to see you on the next one. Peace out.